On the screen.
Here we go.
421. Okay.
20.
Translation, Prabhu. 21, Prabhu?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the translation, no, Prabhu?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled. Sorry, it's gone. The microphone. 1 second. Yeah, yeah. Can't see. Gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions and acts only for the bare necessities of life.
You want to read the purport also?
Yeah. Krishna conscious person. That's it. Oh, yeah. A Krishna conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme, and therefore the part played by him as part and parcel of the whole is not his by choice, but is chosen for him by the Supreme and is done only through his agency. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body.
I made it a little bit easier for read to read. It's a little bigger. Go ahead.
Okay. 1 minute. Body. A Krishna conscious person, yeah. A Krishna conscious person is always told with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine, as a machine part requires oiling and cleaning of maintenance. Similarly, a Krishna conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A crude proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protect, nor does it have any real protest. Here we are. Yeah, animal sometimes he kills the animal in his possession, yet in the animal does not protest. Nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna conscious person, fully engaged in self realization, has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not therefore become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions.
So translation again, such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions. Doesn't mean that he becomes like purposely poor, like he artificially renounces his money, or cause maybe it's his karma to also be very rich, right? There's all sorts of Vaishnavas, dirt poor Vaishnavas like Kolavechar Sridhar, and supremely rich Vaishnavas like Parikshit Maharaj and everyone in between. And maybe it's his karma or the will of the Lord or both that they be rich, that they have a lot of material opulences, right? So the idea of giving up sense of proprietorship, it's the sense of proprietorship and not the actual possessions themselves. It's always remembering, hey, this belongs to Krishna. It doesn't belong to me, but it could be billions of dollars, just like it could be, very little. And acts for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. Who would like to read text 22? How about Blake, Prabhu?
He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Purport. A Krishna conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as is in his power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge.
I'll read the verse again. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady both in success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. What I like about this verse is that, or this idea of being detached from the fruit, whether good or bad, is the idea that this applies to both the physical and the metaphysical, right? It applies on the physical in the sense of, you start a business and you don't know if it's going to be successful or not. You've invested tons of money, but who knows if it's going to work, right? But hey, you're steady in success or failure as long as you're doing your best, your honest best, right? For example, or you get into a relationship, you don't know how it's going to work out, or you move to a new city, etc., etc. But it also applies on the metaphysical plane, especially in the mission of Lord Chaitanya, right, where we have this service of trying to spread Krishna consciousness to every town and village, quote unquote, and we're dealing with other souls who have their free will, who have their individual free will, and therefore we're not controllers of the decisions they take, right? And so therefore, whether Krishna as Paramatma rewards you with tons of people who come forward in Krishna consciousness thanks to your efforts, or with nobody, it doesn't matter. We just work here, As I like to quote Rida Anandamaharaj, and one thing he said, I remember that touched me deeply. He was like, it's just beyond our pay grade, We try our best, and then whether we're successful or not, or whether, let's say, externally there's apparent external successes in our service to Guru and Gauranga, that's up to Krishna. It's beyond our pay grade, and I just work here. Right? Anyone want to add anything? Realization?
How do we avoid letting that attitude become sort of an excuse for this? Because you could, well,
For being lazy?
okay, yeah.
What would you say? I'm sure you've thought about it. I'm sure you have some nice thoughts on the topic.
Well, I mean, I think one slogan we can say is do your best, but don't be attached to the results. So the do your best part is just as important as the second part.
May I add to that? Just to echo exactly. It's not even adding, it's echoing what you said. You know that verse, Karmanye vedikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Nitai Prasad Prabhu. What verse is that? Karmanye vedikaraste. Karma ma phaleshu kadachana. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruit. So it's 247. We already saw it. Let me post it up for you here. Where is 247 Bhagavad Gita as it is? There's more and more links to non-Vaishnava verses out there, versions of the Gita, unfortunately. So here, Devakinandan Prabhu, nope, let me reshare this. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the results of your never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities. And here, this is the important point, I would say, just to echo your words, Devakinanda Prabhu. Never be attached to not doing your duty, right? That's the key phrase right there. You can't be lazy, you know. As long as we know we've tried our best, then hey, then the result's up to Krishna. But like you say, it's really important we to make sure that we're not using this as an excuse to be lazy. Well, we have to remember we cannot be attached to not doing our duty. In other words, we have to be attached to doing our duty. So therefore, we have to be attached, again, physically or metaphysically. You know, metaphysically, we have to be attached to waking up early and, you know, being up there during Brahma Muhurta time, if it's reasonable, you know, in the reasonable, if you're not, unless you're living in, you know, St. Petersburg in August, you know, but, you know, to be up there, to wake up early and to chant those rounds and et cetera, and all your endeavors for spreading Krishna consciousness, or your, you know, business endeavors. Yeah. Cool. Who is our next reader? Text 23.
The work of a man who is unattached to the moods of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge makes entirely into
Merges.
transcendental.
Merges.
Oh,
Merges.
like,
Yeah, merges,
okay.
becomes one, or, you know, enters like a river into a small river into the bigger river. Merges entirely into
Transcendental. Becoming fully Krishna consciousness, one is freed from all duties and
dualities.
those.
Dualities. Lilavanji, pay with all due respect, pay attention to the words. Dualities.
Yes, Prabhu. From all dualities, and those is free from the contamination of the material moods. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional. Prabhu, my English is not so good.
Yeah, what is the constitutional position of the soul? This is a very famous Bengali, classical Bengali verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Talking about Swarup. Constitutional position means Swarup. So what is this very famous verse in Bengali? If you don't know, but you since you're reading and you're Bengali, you quote it for us. You should.
Prabhu, it's জীবের স্বরূপ হয় নিত্য কৃষ্ণের দাস.
Got it, right? Blake, you recognize it as well as Devakinandan Prabhu? Jivera Swarup Hoy Krishnera Nitya Das. Does it ring a bell, Blake? Oh, we can't hear you, but we assume that it rings a bell, Blake Prabhu? That verse, Jivera Swarup Hoy Krishnera Nitya Das?
It does, yeah.
Okay, and you also, Devakinandan Prabhu, and
It's from Shishastika.
no, it's from Chaitanya Charitamrita somewhere. Jivera Swarup Hoy Krishnera. It's from Madhya Lila 20, 108, 108, 109. Let me share it with you.
I'm not as literate as my gray hair would suggest.
Okay, well, here it is for you. Well, Krishna makes it up. Jivera Swarup Hoy Krishnera Nityadas, right? So this line is so fundamental to Vaishnavism because it gives us the definition, according to Kaviraj Goswami, of what or who the soul is, right? To the big question, you know, who am I? Who am I? And of course, this is in contradistinction to the Advaita Vedantist school of thought, which doesn't accept this idea at all. On the contrary, you know, the Advaita Vedantists, the Mayavadis, as we call them, would claim, you know, what is the soul? You know, Aham Brahmasmi, or Tattvamasi, right? We are all one. We are Brahman, you are Brahman, no distinction. But here we have this amazing declaration by Kaviraj Goswami, by the Chaitanya Charitamrita. No, you know, your Swarup, your constitutional position is, what is it? Prabhu's? Yes.
the servant of
Exactly. So please keep reading the purport, Lilavan Prabhu. He knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and
thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness.
consequently, that means therefore,
Consequently, he does whatever he does for who is the
primeval,
Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifice, because sacrifice aims
involves
in at satisfaction.
satisfying.
Satisfying the supreme person, Vishnu or Krishna. The
Resultant.
the resultant reaction to all such work certainly marks into transcendence, and one does not suffer material acts.
Very good.
Effect. Sorry.
Can you mute yourself? That's fine, it's fine. But just mute yourself now if you don't mind. Good, great. So I'll read the verse again. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Devakinandan Prabhu, text 24. Sanskrit-wise, this is a gorgeous verse.
All right, let me try. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnyau Brahmana Hutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahmakarma Samadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute, and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. The principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. The process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness, or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. Brahman means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyoti, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyoti. But when the Jyoti is covered by illusion, maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together Brahman, or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth regains its spiritual quality.
What a beautiful definition. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my God, what
Yeah.
a...
Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the supreme Brahman. Brahman, that is the method of Krishna consciousness.
Jive. Can you read the translation again?
A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute, and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature.
I was just thinking when you were reading about, what would be a good example of this point, how, everything becomes supreme, right? All the elements become spiritualized, right? And kirtan, Harinam Sankirtan, when we all come together for kirtan, right? Like the mantra is obviously Krishna's name. The instruments that we're using are used to glorify Krishna. Our bodies, and therefore, our conscious selves, we're employing them to glorify Krishna.
Everyone who's hearing it,
Everyone who's hearing it, the process, the whole thing becomes Brahman, right? Becomes Brahman.
and those who are hearing some of those who are hearing it may be unintentionally
Well,
doing
then
devotional service just by hearing it. That's the concept that you mentioned in one of the questions.
right, exactly. Agyata what?
Agyata Sukriti.
Exactly, Agyata Sukriti, unknown, pious activities. But here on that topic, it just as a small parenthesis, it's really interesting that in the Gita, I think at the end of, I forget, the 13th or 14th chapter, Krishna himself says that any act of sacrifice or charity or yajna or sacrifice done without knowledge is asat, has very little value. I mean, it's the words of Krishna himself. So one argument so on the one side, you have this idea that stated by Krishna himself, that sacrifice, etc., any type of, devotional service, for example, right, done unknowingly, without faith, especially, right, without faith or without knowledge, has little value, right? And on the other side, you have, the glorification, which is not to be taken for granted either, but it only seems contradictory, of Agyata Sukriti, like you said, of the unknown, the benefit, the amazing, inconceivable benefit of unknown devotional service, such as, for example, the Muslim guy described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, either by Kaviraj Goswami or by Prabhupada, but the Muslim guy whom a cow or a bull, like, how do you say, what's the verb? Get gored, who was gored by a bull, right? And then as he was being gored by a bull, he screamed, haram, haram, right? Which I think in some sort of Middle Eastern dialect means horrible, horrible. You guys are familiar with that analogy that Prabhupada gives, right? Or who's hearing it for the first time?
Yeah, I'm hearing it for the first
time. Okay. So he says, haram, haram, which doesn't mean at all like the name of Vishnu, right? It's just, it literally means like, oh my God, what horror, what horror. But because he said the holy name of Ram as he was leaving his body, ta-da, he gets liberated, right? So those statements are there, but we cannot forget. I think it's important that we should not forget that God himself, the Supreme Person himself, says that such activities have very little benefit when they're done unconsciously. So where am I getting at? I'm getting at that we have to somehow, as much as possible, pray that Krishna grants us the ability and makes happen what he makes happen, that people don't just like hear the holy name in passing in the street, or take some prasadam at some mass prasadam program, like on, in Indradyumna Swami's Polish tour, they distribute like 400,000 plates of prasadam, or at the Govinda's restaurant, whatever prasadam outlets that we may have, and those are wonderful. They're glorious. There's also statements of that one person who took a little prasadam before he left his body. So we can't minimize those, but at the same time, we cannot go to the other extreme of ignoring Krishna's own statement, again, to the effect that, hey, that these type of activities done without faith are asat. I mean, that's the actual word he uses, asat. And therefore, devotees should not think and sit on their laurels and assume that we, and this is the crutch of the point, that we will be able to to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world simply and solely on the basis of doing agyata sukriti for others. I'll say it again, we, on the basis of Krishna's own statement here in this discussion of agyata sukriti, it would be a mistake for us to assume that we will be able, or that we will spread Krishna consciousness successfully, effectively on planet Earth, in the modern world, only by the means or the tool or the agency of facilitating agyata sukriti in others. According to Krishna himself, they have to come to the point where they're like, hey, I'm chanting Hare Krishna because I believe Krishna's God, because I believe in the statements that the holy name of Krishna is all purifying, right? I'm honoring prasadam consciously. There's a saying in French, en connaissance de cause. En connaissance de cause, which is a great expression. En connaissance de cause literally means while being aware of the cause. En connaissance de cause means, it's translated as an informed. It's kind of nice. It's short and sweet. Informed, an informed action, right? So we cannot be satisfied with uninformed or unconscious service that others perform by us facilitating it. We have to pray, and our goal is to get people to the stage of performing informed devotional service, right? Where they're consciously, for example, deciding, hey, I'm chanting Hare Krishna here, I'm hearing, the Bhagavatam class, or I'm hearing the holy name because I have a faith in the process. I've been, I know, at least theoretically, or I believe in this stuff, in this knowledge. That's when, real advancement takes place. Sorry, Devakinandan Prabhu, but I think it's an important point to mention, though. And a lot of us tend to forget that, and
Yeah, I always feel like it's a lot of fun to let people take prasadam without having to really explain much to them.
right.
Trying to background arrange for someone to have a plate of prasadam, and you're saying that's good.
Yeah, definitely.
Nothing wrong with it, but it's not. We shouldn't think of just depending on just doing like background tricks in order to totally spread this thing.
Exactly. The background tricks. Yeah, exactly. Well said. Did you finish the purport? I forgot who was reading. It was. I think it was me, right?
Well, I did get to the end of purport on this previous verse. So.
Please go on. Oh, you got to the end? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
That is, this last sentence, that is the method of Krishna consciousness. We landed there. So
text 21. So I guess it's my turn. So text 21. Some yogis. Oh yeah, you read the translation. So translation to verse number 25. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some of them offer sacrifices in the fire of the supreme Brahman. Purport. As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or a first-class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman, or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories. Such different categories of sacrifice by different types of performers only superficially demark varieties of sacrifice. Factual sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, who is also known as Yagya. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely sacrifice of worldly possessions, such as, giving a donation at the Sunday feast or sponsoring some free Bhagavad Gita distribution, or etc., and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. So I guess here we're talking more, I would suppose, directly hearing and chanting, right? Like lending your ear to a kirtan, or chanting the holy name, or going to your Bhakti Shastri class. Those who are in Krishna consciousness sacrifice all material possessions for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, while others who want some temporary material happiness sacrifice their material possessions to satisfy demigods, such as Indra, the sun god, etc. Well, we don't really have that problem at all in the West. I mean, in the West, it's either hardcore hedonism or some form of monotheism, Whereas in Hindu Bangladesh and Hindu India, right, this issue is a big deal. Like, isn't it, Lilavan? Like, what? I have to only worship Krishna, but what about, Kali, and what about Durga, and what about, Indra? And
I don't know. I've heard conspiracies in the West that some elite rich families like Rothschilds and so on, actually worship the sun god somehow.
Oh, wow.
The sun god.
A big matter here in India or Bangladesh. They say we have to worship Shiva with Krishna.
Right. Yeah. And others who are impersonalists sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of the impersonal Brahman. Right? That's what the Mayavadis do. Like, they try to become one, right? But we know that verse, who that verse, Yenye Ravindaksha Vimuktamaninas, Nitai Prasad Prabhu, you know this verse? Yenye Ravindaksha Vimuktamaninas Toyasta Bhavadali Shuddha Buddhaya Aruhya Krichrena. I just spaced out on it. Aruhya Krishna. Anyway, it's a really important verse in the 10th canto, where Brahma is claiming, it's kind of like that Kaviraj Goswami statement about, the ontological or constitutional position of the soul. So similarly, in the 10th canto, Brahma is making the point that those who want to so-called sacrifice their individual personality and merge, and become one or become God, they don't achieve their liberation is actually imperfect. It's not complete. And after spending eons and eons artificially floating up there in the Brahman, suppressing their identity, they, parampadam, they again fall down. Aruhya krishrena parampadam padam patanti adha. Again, they fall down into the material world. And Prabhupada used to give the example of Mayavadi sannyasis, who would then, after some time, open up schools, right, or charitable institutions. And his argument would be like, why? Why would you do that? If you've realized that you're one and that you're God and that we're all one and everything down here is an illusion, right? Why would you then afterwards go open up schools and charitable institutions? And his argument was that they do so because they feel lonely, because they can't not be what they are. And according to at least the Vaishnavas, we are individual souls, right? But when they're trying to merge into the Brahman effulgence, they get lonely. They want relationship with others. And so according to Prabhupada's interpretation of these Mayavadis doing that, these Mayavadi sannyasis doing that, is that They do that because they're feeling lonely, they're feeling incomplete in that Brahman into which they have not completely merged, even though they're trying. And so they'd rather go back down to the physical plane and interact with other souls, proving the point that we're individual souls, proving the point that we need relationship, proving the point that yeah, we're all individuals, and that the idea of relationship between souls and between each soul with God, with the Supreme Person, is the bottom line, is the conclusion of reality, right? So I'll just continue the purport. And others who are impersonalists sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of the impersonal Brahman. The demigods are powerful living entities appointed by the Supreme Lord for the maintenance and supervision of all material functions like the heating, watering, and lighting of the universe. Those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifices according to the Vedic rituals. They are called Bhav Ishvaravadi, or believers in many gods. But others who worship the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth and regard the forms of the demigods as temporary, sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire and thus end their individual existences by merging into the existence of the Supreme. Such impersonalists spend their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. In other words, the fruitive workers sacrifice their material possessions for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonalist sacrifices his material designations with a view to merging into the existence of the Supreme. For the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, right? Whereas, for devotees, our altar is Radha Krishna. And the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. The Krishna conscious person, like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions, as well as his own self, everything is sacrificed for Krishna, right? But he doesn't lose his identity, right? He doesn't want to lose his identity. Thus, he is the first-class yogi, but he does not, that's a going, Prabhupada says it right here, but he does not lose his individual existence. So these are great purports, for between, Vaishnavism and Mayavadi philosophy. Here's the purport, here's the verse again, and then Nitai Prasad Prabhu is vlogging right now. He's doing a Bhakti Shastri vlog. I don't know if he'll be able to read verse 26, but here's verse 25, translation again. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some of them offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Are you able to read verse 26?
Probably I'm just heading home with the kids, so please do excuse me. I'm so sorry. I'll be home soon. Perhaps some other devotee, please.
I'll read I'll do the second one, okay, Prabhus? So text 26, some of them, translation, some of them sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind, and others sacrifice the objects of the senses, such as sound, in the fire of sacrifice. This is a confusing verse. Purport. Hey, Lilavan, what happened? We lost you.
Prabhu, I'm here. I'm outside from my home.
Okay, well, keep your video on, please.
Okay, Prabhu.
Okay, purport. The 4 divisions of human life, namely the brahmachari, the grihastha, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi, are all meant to help men become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Since human life is not meant for our enjoying sense gratification like the animals, the 4 orders of human... Oh, what happened? Now I lost my... maybe because it's overheating.
Voice is still coming through fine.
Yeah, I think the camera overheated, so it switched off. So let me, that's what they say about this camera, is that it overheats. All right, that's good to know. So let me change my camera settings.
At least the switch is off instead of bursting into flames.
Yeah. All right, here we are. So back to text 20 purport. Sorry, let me just cough here. So right, the brahmacharis. Sorry, men. I'll read the sentence. It's a long sentence. I'll read it again. The 4 divisions of human life, namely the brahmachari, the grihastha, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi, are all meant to help men become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Since human life is not meant for our enjoying sense gratification like the animals, the 4 orders of human life are so arranged that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmacharis, or students under the care of the bona fide spiritual master, control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. They are referred to in this verse as sacrificing the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind. A brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore the pure brahmachari engages fully in Harer Namanu Kirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. He restrains himself from the vibrations of material sounds, and his hearing is engaged in the transcendental sound vibration of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Similarly, the householders who have some license for sense gratification perform such acts with great restraint. Sex life, intoxication, and meat eating are general tendencies of human society, but a regulated householder does not indulge in unrestricted sex life and other sense gratifications. Marriage on the principles of religious life is therefore current in all civilized human society because that is the way for restricted sex life. It's amazing because you look at the society in today's society, at least in America, right? And the whole world, but man, Western Europe, America, and more in India, and it's just the notion of marriage it's non-existent. Like what does marriage mean, right? It's crazy.
It's all everything is all disconnected. It's like sex life is disconnected from marriage, which is disconnected from having babies, and everything is like viewed as its own thing, disconnected from everything else. And meanwhile, the birth rates are dropping precipitously in the developed world.
Yeah,
but that's not what we're talking about here.
I think we are. It's very much connected, Prabhu. I think you raise a really good point, I think. And it's interesting that Prabhupada talks about, marriage as a means to enable souls to be, somewhat sense controlled, to control that, that lust, right? For the sake of a higher purpose, which is self-realization. It's really, kind of scientific, isn't it? Like really practical, really. It's not just some, blind or some faith or some sentimental belief. Yeah, it's a sin, or the Lord said not to, so we'll do it because the Lord said not to. No, there's like a reason why marriage is so important. Like this institution, it's to regulate, souls who are not their bodies, but who are in bodies. And they're just going crazy with their senses and therefore missing out on the goal of life, which is to be connected to Krishna by the way of engaging the senses in Krishna's service as much as possible. And especially, and that's why Prabhupada quotes the Maha Mantra in the last verse, right? By chanting Hare Krishna. Marriage on principles of religious life is therefore current in all civilized human society, right? That's why Prabhupada would often say, like, it's not like modern society is becoming more and more uncivilized, right? Like the advancement of our civilization is not how fast our internet is, right? Or how, whatever, how efficient our QR codes are able to, lead us to another link, or
how many Raptor engines Elon Musk can cram onto a starship.
Exactly. Our definition of a civilized society is to the degree to which the members of that society are sense controlled, and especially and because or thanks to that sense control or along with that sense control are devoted to God, are loving God, are expressing their devotion to God, are dedicating their lives to God, and serving God, right, in their life, regardless of what they're doing in their life. That's civilized. That's civilized. So we should not get mesmerized, right, or like misled by thinking, oh yeah, this is we're really advanced or developed. I mean, developed is a tricky word, right? Developed in what? Like developed in, I mean, as apprentices, isn't there, I'm not familiar very much with the fifth canto cosmology, but aren't there like subterranean planets below planet Earth, like in terms of the planetary systems, and they're like kind of reptilians there, right? And apparently they're like super, super, super advanced in terms of technology, but they're super materialistic too, like totally godless, right? So, just to finish this sentence, marriage on the principles of religious life is therefore current in all civilized human society because that is the way for restricted sex life. This restricted, unattached sex life is also a kind of yagya because the restricted householder sacrifices his general tendency towards sense gratification for the higher transcendental life. Yeah, regardless of whether you're married or not, ideally you have to, you can't just indulge your senses all the time, right? Okay, text 27. Now I think Nitai Prasad Prabhu is home. Maybe you can read 27 and then we'll take a
Yes, Prabhu.
little
Yes, I
break.
can read. Yes. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. Purport. The yoga system conceived by Patanjali is referred to herein. The Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the soul is called Pratyag Atma or Parag Atma. As long as the soul is attached to sense enjoyment, it is called Paragatma. But as soon as the same soul becomes detached from such sense enjoyment, it is called Pratyag Atma. The soul is subjected to the functions of 10 kinds of air at work within the body, and this is perceived through the breathing system. The Patanjali system of yoga instructs one on how to control the functions of the body's air in a technical manner so that ultimately all the functions of the air within become favorable for purifying the soul of material attachment. According to this yoga system, Pratyagatma is the ultimate goal. This Pratyagatma is withdrawn from activities in matter. The senses interact with the sense objects, like the ear for hearing, eyes for seeing, nose for smelling, tongue for tasting, and hand for touching. And all of them are first engaged in activities outside the self. They are called the functions of the prana vayu. The apana vayu goes downwards, vayana vayu acts to shrink and expand, samana vayu adjusts equilibrium, udhana vayu goes upwards. And when one is enlightened, one engages all these in searching for self-realization.
Good. Can you read the translation again?
Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind.
We were going to take a break now, but there's breaking news, and the breaking news is that Atavi Krishna Prabhu has made his entrance on the scene, and therefore we will ask him to not waste a single moment and read to us verse 28 with purport, if he's available. Atavi Krishna Prabhu, the floor is yours. What a disappointment after such a wonderful introduction. Okay, guys, let's take a break then. Let's take a 10-minute break, 5 to 10 minute break. And then when we come back, we'll read on, we'll finish the chapter, and we'll go over the questions as usual. Jai Jai.
His connection is terrible, he claims.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well. Resume the recording. We're back, and Atavi Krishna Prabhu may have a good enough connection to read to us verse number 27, right?
28, Prabhu.
28. Atavi? He doesn't have a good enough connection. So how about oops, sorry. I lost the page. Who wants to read next?
I can read.
Okay, Blake. Let me just get to it. Here we go.
Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. Purport. These sacrifices may be fitted into various divisions. There are persons who are sacrificing their possessions in the form of various kinds of charities. In India, the rich mercantile community or princely orders open various kinds of charitable institutions like Dharmashala, Anachetra, Atiti Shala, Antalya, and Vidyapit. In other countries too, there are many hospitals, old age homes, and similar charitable foundations meant for distributing food, education, and medical treatment free to the poor. All these charitable activities are called Garvya Maya Yagya. And there are others who, for higher elevation in life or for promotion to higher planets within the universe, voluntarily accept many kinds of austerities such as Chandranya or Chaturmas. These processes entail severe vows for conducting life under certain rigid rules. For example, under the Chaturmas vow, the candidate does not shave for 4 months during the year, July to October. He does not eat certain foods, does not eat twice in a day, or does not leave home.
By the way, if I may interrupt you on this one, this is an anecdote that not many devotees know, but maybe Nitai Prasad knows about Prabhupada and Chaturmasya. It's a story that Bhakti Charuswami tells. You know that one? You know, because some,
Yes,
some
Prabhu.
huh?
Yes,
Yeah,
I heard it.
so there's good chances that maybe you Prabhus also haven't heard the story, but it's pretty relevant. It's a small anecdote to show how because sometimes devotees want to create a Prabhupada that's ultra Vedic, whatever that means, and super. I mean, of course, he was ultra strict when it comes to where he's sleeping so many few hours and dedicating every breath to Lord Chaitanya, but. At one point, in 1977, late 1977, Vrindavan, Bhakti Charuswami was Prabhupada's cook, and Prabhupada asks for some spinach, right? And it was the 1 month in the Chaturmasya period where you're not supposed to eat spinach. So Bhakti Charuswami goes to the devotee kitchen, and he's like, hey, Prabhupada wants some spinach. Give me spinach so I can cook. And they're like, we don't have any spinach. It's Chaturmasya, we're not supposed to take spinach. So Bhakti Charuswami goes to Prabhupada and says, Prabhupada, you know, we don't have there's no spinach because it's Chaturmasya. And then Prabhupada looked at him and said, is everyone following Chaturmasya? Like, in other words, like, I don't follow, like, this is like, go get me spinach. Like, I don't give a damn that it's a no spinach month, you know? And then, like, that's all he had to hear. And Bhakti Saraswati ran to Loy Bazaar and bought some spinach there and cooked some spinach, you know? So, a little anecdote regarding Prabhupada and Chaturmasya. Please go on, Blake Prabhu.
Sure. Such sacrifice of comforts of life is called tapomaya yagya. There are still others who engage themselves in different kinds of mystic yogas like Patanjali's system for merging into the existence of the absolute, or Hatha yoga or Astanga yoga for particular perfections, and some travel to all the sanctified places of pilgrimage. All these practices are called yoga yagya, sacrifice for a certain type of perfection in the material world. There are others who engage themselves in the studies of different Vedic literatures, specifically the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras, or the Sankhya philosophy. All of these are called Svadhyaya Yagya, or engagement in sacrifice of studies. All these yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifice and are seeking a higher status of life. Krishna consciousness, however, is different from these because it is the direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness cannot be attained by any one of the above mentioned types of sacrifice, but can be attained only by the mercy of the Lord and his bona fide devotees. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is transcendental.
Jai.
And sorry, is the sentence you were looking for in the homework? It's only by the mercy of the Lord?
For verse 28?
Yeah, there was a, if I remember.
About Agyata Sukriti?
There's the one for a range of verses, like 24 through 31.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe that was the one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. But it's actually a verse from Krishna. So I was looking because, you know, I just want to see what the actual verse from Krishna.
Oops.
Anyway, we'll go there in a few minutes. We'll go there in about 10 minutes. Now, I suggest that since we have 35 minutes left, we kind of go over because we won't have time to read till the end of the chapter. But there's like 5 important, really important verses coming up. So there's 431, which is really important. So let's skip over 29 and 30, and let's go to 31. And I'll just read it. I'll read the translation to that, and then we'll go to the famous 34 and 35, because we really have to cover 34 and 35, because that's like major. So let me read 31 real quick. A beautiful statement by Krishna, which is actually one. I don't know. I'm not a huge. I don't know the Gita that well, but I think it's one of the only verses where there's only 2 lines, as you can see here. It's only 2 lines. Nayam lokostya gyasya kuto nya kuru sattama. That's it. There's no 3rd and 4th line. So it's like a kind of an interesting short declaration by Krishna. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? What a powerful statement, huh? Right? It's like that, unless we perform the yagya, the ultimate yagya especially, of chanting Hare Krishna, we're not going to be happy in this life. We're not going to be happy in this life. Then we forget next life. Even in this life, we're not going to live a happy life unless we do a sacrifice, and especially a sacrifice for God. And the sacrifice for God in this life is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So let's go to 34, Prabhu, and maybe Atavi Krishna Prabhu can read to us from verse 34, because that is like super important. As a personal, tiny little insignificant anecdote, this is the first verse I learned in all the Gita. I remember I did my Bhakta program. I was brand new, and our, in New Mayapur, that rural community in central France, and our Bhakta leader, Nitai Sachisuta Prabhu, he this is the first verse he told us we had to learn, and we did. So for me, it has a kind of a special place in my heart, because it's the first verse I learned. 34. Go for it, Atavi Prabhu. Hopefully you can. Oh man, he was visible for a few seconds. I think you're oh, we don't hear you though. We see you, but we hear you. We see you, but we don't hear you. We heard something for a second. Seems like the connection's good. It's just an audio issue. Can't hear you. Maybe Devaki Nandan Prabhu. Sorry, Atavi Prabhu. Try again. Maybe you can read 35.
34? 34?
Yeah, 34 is a massively important verse.
Pat vidhi pranipatena prashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth.
Now here, it's interesting, if I may make a small little thing, I'm all for the old books of Prabhupada, the old books, right? And I would still be...
I have an old copy not with me right now, the 72 version.
So the 72 version is singular, right? Try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, okay? Inquire from him submissively, but then the last line is important. The self-realized soul, singular, can impart knowledge unto you because he, singular, has seen the truth, okay? In the new version, it says, right, the self-realized souls, plural, can impart knowledge unto you because they, plural, have seen the truth. Now, I've asked some Sanskrit scholars, or just Sanskrit, it's people who know Sanskrit, you don't need even to be a scholar, and apparently the grammar is very, very self-evident. It's a plural. Like, it's undeniable that Krishna is speaking in the plural. So here we have a case where the new version, the post-1972, is actually more correct in terms of Sanskrit, original Sanskrit, like Krishna's original words, right? So the ethical question is like, okay, well, I would still tend to say, well, even if the Sanskrit is plural, we don't have a right to change an author's translation of the Sanskrit to English. And so if Prabhupada, for whatever reason, made it singular, it doesn't mean that, it's no longer singular in its Sanskrit rule of grammar, but that was Prabhupada's choice, and therefore we should keep it at singular. And maybe there could be a footnote saying, by the way, it's an undeniable or non-negotiable or non-argumentable point that, according to basic Sanskrit grammar, Krishna is speaking in the plural. I'm
gonna have to ask my Sanskrit teacher, because Jnaninaha looks like a singular to me.
That's true. But
in the word for word, they say Jnaninaha, but in the verse itself, it's Jnaninas tattva. That's where the ending changes because of the next consonant. So it's a little complicated. I'm going to ask my teacher. I'm just beginning a Sanskrit class right now.
Please come back to us, because I may be wrong. And if I am, I'm very sorry. So, please do come back to us and, ask him whether it's obviously plural or singular. But please read the purport.
The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following the principle of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 says, Dharmam tu shakshad Bhagavat pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path. Nor by so mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path. Nor by independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding. Inquiries and submission. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. Inquiries from, also could be said as inquiries to the learned spiritual.
Right.
One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master. And when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically, and that's when the spiritual master sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Blind following and absurd inquiries. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind toward the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect.
Nice. Please, since you're on the roll, and these two, 35 and 34, are really connected. So can you read, and then we'll come back and, talk about it and stuff, but can you read 35? Because we tend to forget how 35 is important. 35 is the result. What's the consequence of approaching, a spiritual master and hearing from self-realized souls? Well, here we go, 35. What happens then?
So, Yadyadvana punarmoham evam yasyashipandava yena bhutanya sheshani drakshyashyat manyato mai. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. So purport, the result of receiving knowledge from a self-realized soul, or one who knows things as they are, is learning that all living beings are part and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. The sense of an existence separate from Krishna is called Maya. Ma is not Ya, it means this. Some think that we have nothing to do with Krishna, and that Krishna is only a great historical personality, and that the Absolute is the impersonal Brahman. Factually, it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, this impersonal Brahman is the personal effulgence of Krishna. Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of everything. In the Brahma Samhita, it is clearly stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Even the millions of incarnations are only his different expansions. Similarly, the living entities are also expansions of Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that Krishna loses his own separate existence in his many expansions. This thought is material in nature. We have experience in the material world that a thing, when fragmentally distributed, loses its own original identity. But the Mayavadi philosophers fail to understand that absolute means that 1 + 1 is equal to 1, and that 1 - 1 is also equal to 1. This is the case in the absolute world. For want of sufficient knowledge in the absolute science, we are now covered with illusion, and therefore we think that we are separate from Krishna. Although we are separated parts of Krishna, we are nevertheless not different from him. This bodily difference of the living entities in Maya, or not actual fact. The bodily difference of the living entities is Maya, or not actual fact. We are all meant to satisfy Krishna. By Maya alone, Arjuna thought that the temporary bodily relationship with his kinsman was more important than his eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. The whole teaching of the Gita is targeted toward this end, that a living being, as Krishna's eternal servitor, cannot be separated from Krishna, and his sense of being in identity apart from Krishna is called Maya. The living entities, as separate parts and parcels of the Supreme, have a purpose to fulfill. Having forgotten that purpose since time immemorial, they are situated in different bodies as men, animals, demigods, etc. Such bodily differences arise from forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. But when one is engaged in transcendental service through Krishna consciousness, one becomes at once liberated from this illusion. One can acquire such pure knowledge only from the bona fide spiritual master, and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. Perfect knowledge is that the Supreme Soul, Krishna, is the supreme shelter for all living entities. And giving up such shelter, the living entities are deluded by the material energy, imagining themselves to have a separate identity. Thus, under different standards of material identity, they become forgetful of Krishna. When, however, such deluded living entities become situated in Krishna consciousness, it is to be understood that they are on the path of liberation, as confirmed in the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, Muktir hitvanyata rupam svarupenya vyava titihi. Liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna.
In this last statement, muktir hivanyata rupam svarupena vyasati, what's the one word that you recognize from our discussion on constitutional position? Anyone?
Svarup.
Yeah, Swarup. You saw that, everybody? Blake, Lilavan Prabhu, right? This notion of Swarup again. So that's what happens. We approach spiritual master.
Swarup, and then Svarupena. That ena is one of the grammatical endings that means the date. I think it's a dative, so it means in, it's positional. So like it's translated in one's constitutional position.
Acting in one's constitutional position, right? Yeah.
Svarupena. So anyway, yeah.
So that's the result, right? We approach the Vaishnavas, really. We approach the Vaishnavas, and we may take initiation from one of them. But in essence, we approach the Vaishnavas, or at least one, and by hearing from him or from them, the result is that we will know. I mean, we know is like, wow, we will realize that that all living beings are in me or that are in mind. We get this, this Pandita Samadarshina vision that Krishna talks about in 529, right? Vidya Vinay Sampane Brahmani Gavi Hastini Suni Chaiva Swapake Cha Pandita Samadarshinaha, that equal vision. Some devotees actually started a record label in the 90s called Equal Vision Records. By the way, it's still producing records. What a wonderful way to name anything, right? A label, a record label, Equal Vision Records. So that equal vision is obtained, according to Krishna here in the Gita, by the mercy of the Vaishnavas. So how grateful we should be to, you know, to those devotees who repeated the words of Krishna to us, who transmitted Krishna's teachings to us, who spoke to us about Krishna's teachings, who chanted the holy name for us and with us. You know, we owe them everything, you know. Whatever realization we have, whatever spiritual vision we may have now, you know, whatever way we look at the world now, you know, through the lens of scripture, so to speak, through the lens of how Krishna sees the world, that grace was given to us by the devotees. There's a few more verses that are, I mean, unless someone wants to add anything here. Okay, I wanted to speak on verse 30. I mean, I wanted us to discuss verse 36, but I think we'll do that another time because, look, verse 36, I have the post 72 version here on is very similar to another verse that we'll reach in chapter 9. You know, the apichet. Here it's apichet asipapebhya, and then the verse that's often quoted that really says the same thing is apichet suduracharo, right? Even if one commits the most abominable activity, he is still to be considered saintly because he is rightly situated in his determination. So, to save time, we'll get to that in chapter 9. Then there's 37 and 30 and 40. So let's just read 37 and 40. Is Atavi Krishna Prabhu able to read still, or are you still struggling with your internet? Going once, going twice. Oh, we can't hear you. All right, Leelavan Prabhu, why don't you read 37?
As a blazing fire turns firewood to ash, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burns to ash all respections
Oh,
to
reaction.
reaction. Sorry, sir.
Mhm.
Reaction to material activities. Purport: perfect knowledge of self and super self and to their relationship is compared here here
Herein.
herein to fire. This fire not only burns up the receptions to
Reactions.
impose activities. Reactions, sorry, reactions to impose activities.
Impious,
But
right? Impious means, you know,
impious.
yeah, the pop.
But he also all reactions to periods activities, turning them to ash. There are many stages already. There are many stages of reaction. Reaction is the making.
Reaction in the making, reaction fructifying, reaction already achieved, and reaction
reaction a period.
a priori. So a priori is a Latin word actually that means, you know, it means before anything. Read on.
But knowledge of the but knowledge of the constitutional position of the living entity burns everything to ash. When one is complete knowledge, all reactions, both
a priori and a posteriori. That means whatever karma from before or coming after are consumed.
Yes. In the Vedas, Brahma, Aranya.
It is
Wow,
stated.
Brahma Aranya. Brahma Aranyaku Upanishad 4.4.22. It is state Ube.
It doesn't matter, G. Ubehu wahaiva ete taratya mrita sadva sadhuni.
One overcomes both the periods and
Pious,
imperious.
pious. G, pious. Pious. That means, you know, that is
Yes.
good and bad, or you know, punya and pap. So pious is punya, and
And
impious
impious
is apunya or pap.
reactions of work.
Very
I'm
good.
extremely
No, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, if we try to read Bengali, we'll not do very well. So yeah, that's the point, right? Transcendental knowledge, Krishna says, burns up everything impious, burns up, and therefore, you know, we have to constantly be in the fire. And what is the essence of transcendental knowledge? Hint: it's in the Shikshashtakam. It's in the first verse of the Shikshashtakam.
Cheta Darpana Marjanam.
No, I mean that's the verse, but there's a specific sentence in there. Anyone else? There's 3 words that talk about what the essence of transcendental knowledge is, or the life of all transcendental knowledge is. I just said it, but what's the Sanskrit for it? Nitai, Prasad, Prabhu? What's the passage in the first verse of the Shikshashtakam which tells us what is the essence of transcendental knowledge?
Chanting of the holy names of God.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. So that first verse says, you know, Sankirtan, yes. So what is Sankirtan? What is chanting the holy name of God? It is Vidya Vadu Jivanam. That's an important passage to remember, Prabhus. In the Shikshashtakam. Vidya, what does Vidya mean?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. And Vadu, I don't know what Vadu means, but Devakinandan Prabhu may know. But Jivanam means the life of, right? So Prabhupada translated is the life of all transcendental knowledge. So hence, yes, we have to read Shastra. We must read Shastra. We must associate with the Bhagavad, with the person Bhagavad, with the book Bhagavad, because without that association, we don't feel inspired to chant, right? But that activity of chanting, that holy name, specifically, you know, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is Vidyavadu Jivanam. When we come together and chant Hare Krishna together, that itself is the essence of transcendental knowledge.
We got Vadhu means wife.
Wow. There must perhaps be another meaning to it.
Oh, Vadhu.
Yeah. Last verse that we can go over is 440. Especially the last sentence of that verse. So maybe, I don't know, Blake, Prabhu? 440?
Okay. But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. Purport. Out of many standard and authoritative revealed scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita is the best. Persons who are almost like animals have no faith in or knowledge of the standard revealed scriptures. And some, even though they have knowledge of or can cite passages from the revealed scriptures, have actually no faith in these words. And even though others may have faith in scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, they do not believe in or worship the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Excuse me. Such persons cannot have any standing in Krishna consciousness. they fall down. Out of the above-mentioned persons, those who have no faith and are always doubtful make no progress at all. Men without faith in God and his revealed word find no good in this world, nor in the next. For them there is no happiness whatsoever. One should therefore follow the principles of revealed scriptures with faith, and thereby be raised to the platform of knowledge. Only this knowledge will help one become promoted to the transcendental platform of spiritual understanding. In other words, doubtful persons have no status whatsoever in spiritual emancipation. One should therefore follow in the footsteps of great acharyas who are in the disciplic succession and thereby attain success.
Jai.
So being in disciplic succession implies not having doubts, too many doubts, sounds like.
Yeah, but you can, as we all know, you can still be in the disciplic succession and right, and still have doubts, right?
Well, I mean, in principle, if you're properly linked into the disciplic succession, you wouldn't have doubts. So if you're having doubts, maybe that connection isn't so perfect.
Are
I would
you
think.
are you implying that the Vaishnavites himself or herself or them are not good enough, or is it the fault of the disciple? You know, because a lot of disciples of Prabhupada, right, left Krishna consciousness. I don't think there was many problems with Prabhupada himself, right?
There were I would put problems on that connection in disciplic succession. Someone's connected in disciplic succession. How strong and bona fide is that connection itself?
Yeah, but when we speak of connection, we can't. It's not an. There's no subject in connection. It's not like the connection does anything. The connection is a result of two souls, or of a disciple and a guru, or gurus plural. And so the fault of the connection, I think the fault of the connection must either be, in the guru's camp or the disciple's camp. It's not the fault of the connection is just a neutral thing that happens,
Side effect.
right? So if there's something wrong with the connection, the next question is, okay, whose fault is it?
Mm-hmm.
Who's not connecting properly? And oftentimes it's a disciple who's not connecting properly, right?
You would know more often than not. Yeah.
Speaking of faith, like Krishna here speaks of faith, right? Like he says, for the doubting soul. So what's the opposite of doubt? It's faith. And so I just wanted to share with you a verse from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song, O Hey Vaishnav Thakur, which I think is relevant, where he says, are you able to see this verse here or not? Let me share it again. Here we go. In verse 3, here's the translation, or Lilavan, if you want. Why don't you read us the Bengali? Ekaki Amar, Nahi Pai Bal.
একাকী আমায় নাহি পাই বল
Harinam Sankirtane,
হরিনাম সংকীর্তন
Tumi Kripa Kori.
তুমি কৃপা করি শ্রদ্ধা বিন্দু দিয়া
And Deho
দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম ধরে
Dhane.
ধনে আই থিঙ্ক ধরে or ধানে আই থিঙ্ক
So Shraddha, and you know Lilavan, but other devotees, what does Shraddha mean? Faith, right? So you see, like that's why we were talking about Vidya Vadu Jivanam as the holy name or chanting the holy name, Sankirtan Yagya being the essence of transcendental knowledge. Here, Bhaktivinoda, and then Krishna saying, without knowledge, for the doubting soul, there's no success. Well, here, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I do not find the strength to carry on alone the Sankirtan of the holy name of Hari. Please bless me by giving me just one drop of faith, with which to obtain the great treasure of the holy name of Krishna. Please bless me by giving me one drop of faith. So like Devakinandan Prabhu pointed out, like, you know, we need faith. And that faith is given to us by the mercy of Krishna and by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, you know, by pleasing them, right? Speaking of which, we got to stop in 6 minutes, so let's just do a 3-minute kirtan, and then we'll call it quits for today. Nitai Prasad, you want to lead?
Prabhuji, I think, please, if you can lead, please.
Okay. I'll just do it simply. So let me put a picture of someone or some. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Gaurahari, Nitai Gauranga, Gaurahari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Panchakalpaturvyacha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha.
Patitanam Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha.
Jai Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, thank you. See you next
Hare
week.
Krishna. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Hare Krishna. Hi, say Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah.